Right, I'll start counting now. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Commissioner Zoe. I'm the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, and I will be chairing this meeting today. Welcome to Mabs Hussain, who is our new NYP Deputy Chief Constable. I'd like to go to the agenda item now, please. And agenda item 1 is attendance and apologies. I believe we have 2 apologies today from Lisa Wynyard and Mark Panoni. So agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting and actions. Is everybody content with the previous minutes? I am. There were 2 matters arising from last time, and the matters arising are regarding introducing a system so that mainly motorists who are given a fixed penalty notice can view the evidence before agreeing to the fixed penalty. Has that been introduced? And I'm taking that to Lindsay. And also there was another matter arising around bike thefts in York. Work is ongoing to addressing the repeat offenders. Is there an update, please, Lindsay?
Thank you, Commissioner. So in relation to the first point, I would just like to clarify that anybody who requests the evidence being held by police in relation to alleged offences can contact the Traffic Bureau to ensure that their appropriate support and guidance is provided. That includes access to the footage where available. We are also exploring systems that would automate that approach, and we will bring an update to a further meeting on that particular point. In relation to cycle theft and repeat offenders, I believe this issue stemmed from queries around the City of York and particular crime trends. Just to reassure the public that this is absolutely a focus for the York Command, and the York City Task Force are actively dealing with this matter and have a problem-solving plan, engaging with some of our key partners, but making sure we have got that relentless focus on our offenders, because we know that is a real.
Oh, I think you've just frozen there, Lindsay, but we got the gist of what you were saying. Thank you very much. So agenda item 3, which is questions from the public. So we've had 2 questions from John from Whiteley. Question 1. I'd like to know why North Yorkshire Police do not deploy the camera safety van at night in the hours of darkness. East Yorkshire Riding Police Force seem to be able to do this successfully, and I see there are vans out quite regularly in the early evening. Is the North Yorkshire Police equipment not capable of working in the darkness, or is it a staffing issue or something else? So the second question is, why does it take so long to publish the camera van reports on the North Yorkshire Police website? Over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you. So in relation to the first point, I can confirm that our safety camera vans are equipped with low-level light technology, so they can operate during the hours of darkness, and they do. And in addition, we would also focus our proactive roads policing patrols during the hours of darkness as well. So just to reassure the gentleman that we do have the capability, we do operate within the hours of darkness, and it's also a real focus for our roads policing team. In relation to the second point, we can only apologise for the delays in publishing some of that information. We've recently moved to a new force website using the single online home technology, and we'll hear a little bit more about that today from Jason Dixon. But it has meant that there have been some delays in populating some of our information. So I understand that that is now back in place, and I will share the relevant links across with your team so that we can publish them after this meeting.
Lovely, thank you very much, Lindsay. So we'll go on to agenda item 4, and that is North Yorkshire Fire Rescue Service, succession planning, talent management and promotion process presentation. John, are you taking this forward?
Hi, Zoe, slides.
Hello, I'm handing this one on to Jonathan Dyson, Deputy Chief Fire Officer for this one, Commissioner.
Thank you. Hello, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, John. First off, Commissioner, I'll give an introduction into North Yorkshire and our staffing profile, and then we'll hand over to our Enable colleagues to talk about the brilliant work that we're doing within succession planning and talent management. If we go on to the first slide, please, Sean. So the points we'll cover today. our skills gaps and profile, and ultimately it's what we'll do to address those within the workforce profile now and in the future. We're going to look at what our journey has been around workforce planning, the challenges and opportunities that we're currently faced with, and the future challenges as well. Our current strategic landscape, which includes the inception of bespoke people plans, which was a new product for North Yorkshire Fire through the inception of Enable, which is benefiting us greatly, and the introduction of a quarterly workforce planning and talent management model. Now, this is really driving us forward in how we monitor, how we progress, and ultimately how we embed the talent management process right throughout the organisation. And ultimately, we'll look at the benefits to North Yorkshire Fire and also the community and our wider family of partner agencies as well. And ultimately, through Enable, we'll look at how we measure our impact and what this is actually delivering for us. Next slide, please. Now, firefighter to chief fire officer retirement projections. It's an important point to raise here that these are projections, because inherently talent management and the succession planning for what we're doing here is very difficult. Normally, our workforce, the retirement profile that we'll project is based on the 30-year pension. With the pension changes, that obviously increases, and the opportunities that were created around people then being able to stay within the service for longer. And we don't have an upper ceiling. If people are able and willing to continue, provided they're still passing the fitness test and the competency standards within service, they may remain within service. So we do this on two bases. One gives us the potential, which is usually taken from the person's pensionable age, and confirmed. It is literally only confirmed when the individual hands in their notice to us, and we're able to take forward on that basis. Now, within our service, we have one chief fire officer, we have one deputy chief fire officer, we have two substantive area managers, we currently have a third area manager, which is on a temporary basis for 3 years, fulfilling the transformation area manager role. We have 8 group managers. Now, our upper tiers for senior management are classed as the area manager, deputy chief and chief fire officer. And within North Yorkshire, those 3 roles form the strategic leadership team. Middle managers are group managers and station managers. Supervisory managers are watch and crew, and then of course our firefighters. Now, what is our profile and what are we considering within North Yorkshire? Now, we have quite a high retirement profile. We within the next 5 years there, as displayed there, the chief fire officer has the potential and has confirmed retirement within the next financial year. Myself, who was temporary deputy chief fire officer, I have a long time to go, so that isn't counted within those figures. However, we have 2 area managers. 2 area managers of the 3 have the potential to retire within this next financial year. So for us, that equates to a potential 75% of our senior leadership team, the fire goal team, being able to retire. As we look across the board, we have in total around 48 potential and confirmed posts from firefighter right through to chief fire officer that can retire, and these are across the board. What we haven't been able to, put in the current slide is also reflection on specialist staff and also then our community safety and Enable staff, for instance, which also have an impact on our work and our community safety and the work that we do within those communities as well, which is also a key area that we focus on through the talent management with Enable. Now, within the roles, the group and station managers, our middle manager cohort, they are the absolute engine of our organisation. And within the specialist roles and within the roles that they provide from an operational perspective, this is where the largest cadre of skills and also courses are derived throughout those roles, because of the vast amount of incidents they go to and of course the vast amount of skills that they need within there. Now, talent management within this process is something that we have to consider heavily, one for the training burden on the organisation and how we fulfil that, and of course making sure that we have the projected budget in which to meet that need as well. This is something we take extremely seriously and we continuously plan. We don't do this in isolation. We work with neighbouring services, regional services and also national services to make sure that we have the skill sets, the training and the provision, and where necessary the resilience from neighbouring counties to make sure that we are able to respond continuously. And an example of this and our co-working with regional partners is we have a memorandum of understanding with them to share officers. So from a command perspective and a skills perspective, we share officers across the board if there are terms of national or otherwise, which helps develop and grow our talent within our organisation. And that again is applied out nationally. Now I'll move on to the next slide, please, Sean. So considering our potential number of 48 retirements in total out of our workforce, and also considering that at a senior level, we have a large number of people leaving. This presents us with, as I've just stipulated there, around the knowledge and skills gaps. And it's also around that corporate history and corporate knowledge. When the Chief Fire Officer leaves, he'll take a significant portion of corporate knowledge with him that is difficult to replace. Not being the skill sets that he has as our chief and the skills and the one he brings to the organisation, it's difficult to replace that knowledge within there. And that is again where the succession planning comes in. We also, we understand in our everyday work in business as usual and through inspections with the HMI, we understand that we have a current underrepresentation in our workforce diversity profile. And this is something that we are ardently pushing and putting everything we possibly can into improving across the board. However, let's not forget that this also gives us opportunities. As people retire and as people move on to other roles or move across services, this gives us the chance to refresh our skill sets, our demographics, our diversity in neurodiversity, everything, but with new ideas, new creativity, and also innovation, as those skills come in from other sectors potentially, and also from other services. Now, the gaps identified gives us new initiatives. Something we're driving forward with Enable is Leading the Way. Leading the Way is a talent management profile to develop middle managers and also supervisory managers. It's giving us a common skill set. It's allowing them to find their own innovative and creative ways through their own leadership styles and also developing their leadership style. It gives them a broad range of topics throughout leadership and also gives them an inherent understanding of the service. And again, as this develops, it allows us to build that organisational knowledge that we lose as people move on from the service. We are working to, and as we've discussed previously, improving our data and how we access our data. Now, our data and analytics, as this evolves and matures, it gives us the opportunity to do more as we understand our workforce. We are introducing positive action champions, and we're looking at the strengths profile and also other tools such as Myers-Briggs profiles to help leaders develop and also then work and again bring that soft magnetism to our workforce for people to want to join us because they want to be a part of who we are and what we represent, which is a values-based organisation. I have some notes on some other key areas that we're looking to develop, which includes when we consider around a flexible approach, particularly on working through COVID and the agile working that is now becoming embedded. This gives us an opportunity to reach out to other aspects or other areas that potentially we hadn't included before. From an on-call firefighter perspective, as we have more people working at home, we're looking to tap into the new potential, sorry about a bad network, the potential for people who may want to join and support us who weren't available before and now potentially throughout the day. We're also looking at expanding our volunteering opportunities. And why would we do this? Well, ultimately, volunteers are and alumni opportunities are people that are leaving the organisation, but instead of considering them as a leaver and we have no further contact with those individuals, we can take the opportunity to harness their knowledge, their skills, and possibly they return in other roles or they return to as leaders and as mentors and coach to help current staff and also potential future staff. As we look to do positive action and around recruitment is using them as leadership and role models to help embed and drive the change that we're looking to deliver. We have a national course which we access to become strategic leaders, which is the Executive Leadership Programme, which is delivered through the National Fire Chiefs Council. Now we're looking to shape, and Leading the Way forms part of that basis for us to gain access into those skills. So we're working collaboratively with Enable and also with regional and national services to see how we can develop that, how we develop our leadership profile and also promote the service for all roles across both within Enable and with Fire. And of course, this plays into the key collaboration that we have with Enable and with police. Well, we are seeing the skills being shared. We are seeing greater access to those services and the talent management that Enable are now going to talk about. And I'll hand you over now to Rebecca Powell, please.
Thank you. So Jonathan has just shared with us the strategic introduction of the service's workforce profile over the next 5 years. And it's really clear that over the next 5 years, there's high potential through these projections and horizon scanning of the significant changes to staff movements, including the exiting of staff members with long lengths of service and staff members in senior and specialist roles. Delivering an excellent service to our communities and being able to thrive in a constantly evolving environment really relies on having people with the right capabilities, commitment and behaviours now and in the future. So as we move through this presentation, the information that we're sharing is designed to, one, provide assurance of effective workforce planning practices in place to determine future workforce needs and to ensure long-term sustainability. Describe the process of attracting new talent and also developing existing high potential talent to ensure that people have access to the right opportunities, exposure, stretch and development to reach their potential, whether that be in their current role or for a future role. And also we'll set out the potential benefits to be realised by the service, staff members and the community we serve. Just for the purpose of clarity, as we progress, what we mean when we refer to workforce planning is the series of actions, practices and processes that align the services strategy with the people strategy. And when we refer to succession planning, we're referring to the identification of development of talent to fill current or upcoming critical positions in the service. If we could move to the next slide, please, Sean. Thank you. So we're going to move to look at the strategic landscape, and in the people partnering team we work to continuously understand the strategic landscape of the service to ensure we have that we are supporting the strategic and tactical leadership teams that we work most frequently with. So what we know is that the world of work is changing and that we need to respond to attracting next generation talent and at the same time supporting our existing workforce in the transition to a more digitally focused world. From the demand of the service to the agility of the workforce, resilience and the constant of change is a key focus. We understand the Fire Minister's direction across the 3 areas of reform: people, professionalism and governance, and in particular, roles and services must be open to high calibre people regardless of their background, and fire and rescue services need to be welcoming and inclusive places in order to attract, retain and develop that talent. We recognise the importance of delivering organisational development recommendations from the inquiries and inspections to create a fire and rescue service that's fit for the challenges of the 21st century. We understand the strategic direction of Ambition 2025 and the need that talented people are identified for their ability and developed for future roles. Everyone's continuously developed in their existing roles, and also our resources are matched to the risk, demand and availability of staff and affordability. We know that the people strategy supports the growth of a values-based culture in our delivery of the Fire and Rescue Service plan through 3 strategic aims: maximising organisational and management capability to improve people management outcomes, foster a values-based culture focused on diversity, inclusion and well-being, and develop and implement an integrated suite of high-performance people practices focused on positive staff engagement. All of these are strategic drivers which have led to the introduction of the people partnering team co-creating bespoke people plans with each of the heads of function within a North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. So what are people plans? People plans are the internal tool used to translate these strategic priorities into actionable people solutions over years 1, 2 and 3 currently. The actionable solutions are commissioned into the relevant teams within people services for prioritisation, support and delivery, and the quarterly reviews that are held between people partnering and the heads of function provide space for progress, monitoring and measurement to be explored, discussed and recorded. The creation of these plans has been a hugely exciting introduction as we've worked through discovery, design and implementation phases to create plans which clearly map the future focus approach for each of the services heads of function. As an example, the plans detail what that function's unique selling point is, so what that area of the service is all about. The operational scope of the function, so what they do, the function's top 3 priorities, the areas the function wants to improve in, sustain, and what they're currently shying in doing. The areas of development for the head of function, the team, and the support that the head of function would really like from people partnering as we continue to support them through developing and delivering their plans. Each people plan includes local and corporate priorities, which aligns to the strategic direction and the drivers mentioned above. And some examples of the corporate priorities that are included in the plans include improving and embedding talent management, development and succession planning at all levels of the service, continuing to focus on healthy, inclusive, values-led and compassionate cultural development, and strengthening our ability as a service to provide an excellent on-call service through improved talent attraction, retention and progression. We could move to the next slide, please, Sean. Thank you. So as we move into this slide and looking at the workforce planning journey of the service so far and over the last 12 months, we've included some examples of key milestones and activity. Historically, the service has used the establishment and strength reports, workforce data from internal reporting systems, leaver data and predicted leaver and retirement data to anchor decisions on future recruitment and promotion activity, for example. In April 2021, Enable North Yorkshire was launched and the discovery and designing of the people plans commenced. In July 2021, People Services Strategy and People Plans were both launched. So April to July were extremely busy and jam-packed with learning, understanding, designing and collaborating with professional analysis from the discovery learning. August saw the launch of the first workforce profile report, which included information, for example, on the current operating environment, for example, any true or upcoming vacancies, leaver projections, and a pestle and SWOT analysis to look at the landscape and horizon. The report also included recommendations which are aligned to the people plans and the strategic focus and direction of the service. Running in addition to this, the talent acquisition team were responsible for responding to the workforce changes and managing live recruitment campaigns. So, for example, the recruitment processes for the temporary Chief Fire Officer and the temporary Deputy Chief Fire Officer were all in August. In September, the team managed an area manager recruitment campaign, and as we moved into October, this month saw campaigns for both station and group manager recruitment. October was an equally exciting time for Enable and the service as the talent planning and analytics lead was recruited and the release of the second workforce planning report was produced. I'll now hand over to Sean to talk in more detail about what has been done since April 2021 and talk through the launch of the new talent management model.
Great, thank you, Becca. So I'll be coming on to the talent management model in a bit more detail shortly. I think it's really exciting and what we can do with that. I know within this time, so there's been a huge amount of work that has happened. I know we've been through a huge amount of change in terms of the Enable, but also COVID can sort of impact everything as well. But so I wanted just to revisit some of the things we've done and some of the things we've achieved within this time up until this point. So one of the first things we've done is we've introduced a new applicant tracking system or ATS system. Now, this is really important for a number of reasons. When it comes to recruiting our talent, it enhances the candidate experience. So it's a much more seamless transition for candidates. It allows us to collect more data. I know both Becca and Jonathan have mentioned the importance of data for us going forward. And the applicant tracking system will allow us to collect this, which means we can further enhance and inform future recruitment processes. We have identified our key skill gaps, so we spent a lot of time looking at what our key gaps are. Now, key gaps can be seen as from a number of different perspectives. First of all, as Jonathan's walked us through, actually, do we have the right people in the right places from a numbers perspective? what are the potential risks and gaps we may foresee over the next 5 years in terms of potential retirees or potential leavers. But on top of that, what are the potential skill gaps? So what skills or knowledge or behaviours do we need to be mindful of as well? Now, understanding this sets us up in the best place to mitigate against any risk. We have made workforce planning a priority. So we've put significant time into increasing our ability to use data and draw insight from data. But also, as Becca mentioned, we've hired a new specialist into our team to focus on analytics to help us from a workforce planning perspective. The people plans have been absolutely critical. So the people plans, as Becca's mentioned, will help us to understand what is it we need, what activity do we need to deliver against in order to meet our priorities, and also to deliver against our organisational values. We've touched on leading the way, critical for our managers, our leaders, to understand how we can help them to reach their potential. If our leaders are hitting their potential, then the chances are that the rest of the organisation will be in a better place as well. We've got a recruitment plan as well for the next 5 years. So what we want to be in a position of is that there are no surprises when it comes to our recruitment needs, our hiring needs, our developmental needs. The more kind of planning we can put in place now, the better equipped we are to deal with any challenges or potential challenges over the next few years. Finally, as part of one of our big commitments around equality, diversity and inclusion, we have developed and are currently piloting what we're terming the SHINE programme, which this is a programme used to support individuals who identify as being from underrepresented groups in order to level the playing field, so to speak. And we've also participated in the Women in Fire development programme. So some good initiatives so far. This is just the start, so there's a lot of exciting work to come. Before we dive into kind of our plan and what's next, I wanted to just touch base on the talent management model. We've mentioned this and referenced this a few times, but I wanted to let you all know what this actually is and why we're looking at this. Now, we've spoken this afternoon, already about the huge changes we're facing, both from a workforce perspective in terms of the type of skills we're looking for, the type of skills we need, also the turnover we're likely to experience. And what we know is that when it comes to managing our organisation from a people perspective, none of recruitment development can happen in isolation. We need to have a joined up process. So, for example, when we're thinking about the type of people we want to recruit, the type of people who will deliver our strategy, we need to know exactly what it is we're looking for. Now, to help us do so, we've developed this talent management model. So we're looking at talent planning in particular today, which talent planning we define as an understanding of the talent we have. So what currently do we have in our organisation, but also the talent we need to develop our strategy. So we know where we need to get to, but also it's about understanding where we are today. This forms one part of our overall model. So you can see it at the top here, the talent planning piece. So the talent planning really does represent, okay, what people do we need to develop to deliver against our strategy, to deliver against Ambition 2025, and to ultimately serve our communities. This can be, what skills do we need? What knowledge do we need? What strengths do we need? From that perspective, we then go, okay, we know where we need to be. How do we bring those people into the business? How do we hire these individuals into the business? So the planning informs our acquisition being bringing people into the organisation. So we've got a recruitment plan now, which is aligned to our values, aligned to our strategy. We also need to understand at point of hire who is likely to be a future leader. Of course, when we're hiring people, it can't just be for the here and now. We need to be future-proofing ourselves. So again, I'm going to talk in a couple of slides' time about steps we've taken to increase our ability to spot high potential in individuals earlier in their careers. We then need to understand, okay, with people in our organisation, how do we help them to reach their potential once they're with us? How do we develop their skills, develop their strengths, develop their behaviours. And that's all what development's about. But again, it's all targeted. It all comes back to that planning piece. We know where we need to develop them to. We know what skills they need. We know what strengths they need. So we can be really targeted in their development. Management is then about how do we maintain people's performance. So we're assuming by this point we've got people in the business, people have the right skills, strengths, behaviours. How do we keep them there? How do we keep people engaged? How do we enable people to maintain performance over time? And then we've got transitioning, which is all about movement or role changes. So for instance, if someone's going to be promoted or moving roles internally, or actually leaving the organisation, Jonathan mentioned the alumni piece that we're exploring too. It's about how do we ensure that the transition is managed in the best way. You can imagine as well that if we know that when we know that there are X amount of people to be promoted over the next few years, that is then going to further impact our planning, which again will impact our acquisition. And you can see it's a kind of cyclical process where every element informs everything. So what we're trying to do here is have a joined up approach to how we manage people. Now in the middle, we do have the equality, diversity and inclusion call out. Now this is to say that everything we do is done inclusively. So when we plan, we need to, how do we ensure that the way in which the expectations we're setting, the strengths we're setting, the behaviours we expect, how can we ensure that that's done in an inclusive way? And when we go out to recruit and hire individuals, we do so inclusively. Today we are going to be focusing on the talent planning. We could spend days going through the rest of the model, but today the focus really is about talent planning. And as Becca's mentioned before, about our role in workforce planning and succession planning. So why are we taking this approach? Why are we going down this path? There's a few reasons really, and one of the first things is we need to make really informed decisions about our talent aligned to our strategy. So without sufficient planning, it would kind of be akin to going blindfolded into a room and trying to hit a dartboard. It doesn't set us up in the best way. We need to be very, very clear about what we want, what we need to deliver our strategy, and the planning will help us to get the ball rolling, to recruit people in the right way and to develop people in the right way. It helps us to understand our current and future skills gaps. So again, the more data, the more knowledge we can have about gaps today and in the future will help us to recruit, to bring those skills in, and to be quite targeted in terms of our development. Recruiting in line with our values, code of ethics and strengths. Again, we are a values-led organisation. We need to understand actually who is going to thrive with us, because who's going to thrive with us in North Yorkshire may be different to who might thrive in a different area of the country or in a different service. We need to know who's going to thrive with us, with our culture, with our values, with our code of ethics. So we need to be really quite specific there. Identifying critical positions. So again, the earlier we get data, the earlier we get information, the earlier we can act. Ensuring a healthy succession plan for key roles. We want to have a point in time where we understand throughout the organisation exactly when people are ready to make the step up, who wants to make the step up. We need to have a real clear succession plan in place, and this will enable us to do so. Data and insight into leavers and retirees. So are people leaving for any reasons that we could perhaps mitigate or prevent? From a retiree perspective, are there any commonalities around when people might want to retire? We mentioned the pensions piece earlier, but are there other factors so we can be even more granular and specific when predicting who may leave? A greater understanding of potential and internal talent pool. So again, it's that potential to do what? We've defined what we're looking for as part of the planning piece. So how can we better understand someone's likelihood to develop these key things in the future? And just the sort of headline here really is that this approach will help us to have the right people in the right roles and at the right time. Critical to this, we keep talking about where we're aiming our sights and finding the right people. Critical to doing this is through the introduction of something called strengths. Now, strengths is something that we are in the process of looking to roll out at the minute. The best way to think about strengths is most people are familiar with competencies, or many of us who have been to interviews before, and many of us who have assessments at work often have competency-based assessments, which ultimately is something you're good at. So we are deemed to be good at our jobs through our competence, which is fine. We need to know that. With strengths, we also look at what people are good at, but additionally, we're interested in what people enjoy and what people use often. Now, this is really important because we want people to come into our organisation who naturally enjoy the types of activities, the types of behaviours that are required of our workforce. If you can get people whose strengths align to the workforce, then the likelihood is their performance will reach the required level quicker, it will sustain longer over time, and they are more likely to thrive and reach leadership positions. In short, looking at strengths, what we are still looking at is competence. We still want to know if someone can do the job, but additionally, we're looking at people's potential to also develop competence in the future. So we know who's going to come in and hit the ground running, and we know where their strengths are going to be, but also we know that with greater accuracy over time, if they're likely to reach their potential. Just a few things to call out around strengths. So we are the first service to implement this at a principal officer level. We've worked with the OPFCC to have this approach endorsed. So we're going to be rolling this out shortly. Really critical to mention, when we talk about our clear structure of where we're aiming, we're going to be creating a very specific strengths framework. What this framework will do is say, okay, what are the strengths? So a collection of like behaviours, knowledge, skills, and personality. But what are the things we need to deliver within the North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service? This is built upon psychological research we're undertaking with a partner organisation, but it's also going to be underpinned by our values, by our strategy, by our vision, and our code of ethics. So we can be confident anyone we bring into the organisation, anyone we develop aligned to these strengths, will have an increased likelihood of performing with us. As mentioned, key focus is that we look at potential as well as just competence. Really critical when we're thinking of longer term sustainability and helping us to find our future leaders. Right person, right role really is critical. It allows us to consistently articulate what good looks like. So having this framework in place will allow us as an organisation to consistently say, right, we know what good looks like for us at North Yorkshire Fire Rescue Service because we've got to articulate it from a strengths perspective. It also sets more clarity for the team in terms of where should we spend our time developing. And finally, worth calling out that there's a lot of research around strengths, and particularly some of the interesting points I found recently around strengths have been found to increase employee engagement. Employee engagement is something is about people feeling energized at work and people feeling like vigorized and dedicated to their work. We know that does increase performance. Strengths also increase performance in their own right. And you can imagine if you have a job that you ultimately enjoy, you're probably more likely to stay there. So strengths, unsurprisingly, does increase retention. And again, these things are likely to lead to greater community outcomes. So what's next? We've pulled out some of the key activity we're looking to deliver over the next 12 months or so, as well as a commitment in terms of how we're going to measure these things. So first of all, continuing from the point of strengths, we are going to implement a strengths framework and assessments within the service. So in terms of measuring this, I know Jonathan mentioned that our Chief Fire Officer looking to retire. So we're going to look to deliver this role using a strengths-based process. So again, hiring from a perspective of alignment to our values, our strategy, our vision, our code of ethics. What we'd expect to see from this is that we get positive feedback from assessors and candidates as part of the process. It needs to be a positive experience for candidates, but ultimately as well, we need it to deliver our new Chief Fire Officer who will be deemed to be a high performer, having come through this process. That's one of the things we'll be looking at. Second is about improving our onboarding and induction process. So we'll deliver a structured programme for all new individuals who come into role. So again, this would be from a planning perspective. We know the skills they need, we know the strengths they need. So the induction and onboarding process has to revolve around this planning piece. We can also use data we've gained throughout our recruitment process. So as we're looking to hire people, we know what people's strengths will be, we know what their development areas will be. So we need to be able to use that to inform and improve on onboarding and induction. The same true as well for our newly promoted individuals throughout the force. We're also going to provide a 30, 60, 365 feedback process, so collecting feedback from new hires at regular intervals to understand what can we be doing better for your induction, your onboarding, and improving your experience with us. Thirdly, we are going to look to improve our attraction strategies and introduce an employer value proposition. So by this being, okay, working for our service, what do you get in return? What is it about our service that should make you want to come and work for us? So that's something we are working and putting a lot of effort and time behind. So we'd expect to see a higher number of applicants to all roles. We'd expect to see greater activity across our social media channels around recruitment type activity. We'd also expect to see greater diversity within our applicant pools. Mentioned previously, this is a huge focus area for us. We do expect that from the introduction of our employer value proposition, we'd expect to see greater diversity applying and sustaining throughout all stages of our recruitment process. On to the next three. The next sort of thing we'll be looking at is increased leadership development. We know that Jonathan described it earlier as our kind of supervisors, first line supervisors being the driving force behind a lot of the organisation. Anyone in our organisation can be a leader, is a leader, and will lead at different points throughout their career. And we want to invest in that and develop and harness that leadership development throughout our organisation. We've mentioned the Leading the Way programme, and we're also looking at rolling out what we call a coaching and mentoring academy. So again, harnessing those skills and abilities within people. In terms of measuring impact, knowing that we are developing leaders in the right way, there's a number of different things. So we'd expect a higher leadership performance determined by our personal development and performance reviews, or PDPRs. We will come on to those in a second as well, but we'd expect to see higher performance levels. We can also expect to see a greater fit in our organisation to the National Fire Chiefs Council's leadership behaviours. So that, again, the leadership behaviours that we'd expect to see a greater fit. And ultimately, what this all boils down to is improved outcomes for the communities. In terms of the PDPRs, or the personal development performance reviews, a huge piece of work we're undertaking is to improve this process across the organisation. And then, as a knock-on effect as well, increase our career conversations. Now, we want our PDPRs to enable everyone in our organisation to deliver to their full potential. So as part of this new process, we want it to take into account people's development needs, their development preferences, their ambition, their well-being, amongst other things. What we'd expect to see as a result of this new process is a higher completion of PDPRs. So by this, we mean everyone should have a strong, audited, structured PDPR in place that is meaningful to them and to their career. We want people to understand when they're going through their PDPRs, the benefits that this has for them personally in their careers, but also the benefit it has in terms of delivering against the organisation's strategy. We'd also expect from this completion perspective that our managers are equipped to have development focused conversations. We appreciate that this is, this in itself is a very specific skill, so we'll be investing in enabling our managers to have very development focused conversations with our colleagues. We'd expect a greater proportion of senior hires to be made internally if we're enabling the development of our organisation and we're driving the performance of our organisation. We'd expect to see our organisation, or people in our organisation, equipped to make that step up and fulfil their potential. And finally, we'd expect to see greater retention, so more people performing to a higher level, more people having their needs met, with a greater focus on well-being. We'd expect to see retention increase as well. And then finally, a really key point, central again to everything we're doing, is the enhancement of an inclusive and diverse work environment. There's a number of different initiatives we're looking at here. So in terms of, we've introduced positive action champions. So in terms of positive action, how can we ensure that there are people throughout the organisation, champions of this, custodians of this, who will reinforce the need for an inclusive workforce and inclusive behaviours. We are in the process of procuring and then subsequently delivering a dedicated diversity project. So this will be rolled out to all of our service, as well as our partner organisations, in terms of the importance of generating and creating an inclusive workforce. And we're also, as I've mentioned before, looking at increasing our data analytics. So things like understanding at different points of our recruitment process, where what's our kind of diversity breakdown there? Are there certain areas where we tend to find that there are members from an underrepresented group who tend to drop out of the process? Is there anything we can glean from that? Any insight we can gain? Ultimately, the way in which we'd measure our success against this is, as a minimum expectation, we want to see a greater representation of minority groups across our organisation. We also expect to see a greater number of individuals who identify as being from minority groups taking senior roles in the organisation too. So we'd expect to see this throughout all levels. Just to bring us to the end of this presentation, I'd like to hand back over to Jonathan just to touch upon our values.
Thank you very much, Sean. Commissioner, I'm sure you can see that we're all absolutely positively, driving forward everything we can around talent management. But we need to be cognizant of the fact that ultimately, for people to want to be a part of this organisation, and importantly for our staff, we need to make them and ensure that they feel like they belong within our organisation, our culture. And culture is a massive part, because it's basically how we do business. It tells the public what we're about and how we go about our business. And as we've discussed there, we are a values-based organisation, and that is driving culture change within our service. And the code of ethics is driving the culture change nationally within the fire service. And I'd just like to reflect on how this ties in through the talent management as to how we're driving our future values. Now, people, we exist to serve the public, quite simply. That's what we're here for, and we put the public first. So our recruitment and our talent management strategies, as Sean's talked about there, is around the strengths of individuals. And firefighters right through to the chief fire officer needs to have strengths which will engage and actually drive our prevention, our protection. Ultimately, they are our drivers forward in the service. And we do this through understanding the needs of our communities and also our staff. We need to make sure, and we do make sure, staff feel appreciated, they feel safe and supported in the workforce. So people joining the organisation will be buying into somewhere where their wellness, their mental health is of the utmost priority to us. And also our current staff feel that they are able to access those support mechanisms where possible to make sure that when they turn up to work, they are able to be their authentic self and also deliver the best possible service to the public, which gives us positive results. And ultimately, our staff need to know, and they are being empowered to understand, that every little thing that we do, wherever you work within the organisation, somehow ties into the service delivery to the public in reducing risk and reducing vulnerability. And as Sean's talked about there about measurement and evaluation, this is being delivered through the service so that we are able to use the actions of our crews, the strengths of our crews, to understand what impact that's having on the community. And again, if we need to develop our staff, if we need to develop our strategy and how we work with people, then that's how this will feed back into our talent strategy and ultimately our strengths-based assessment and development of people. And inclusion, and I'll talk about belonging again here. We could be as diverse and inclusive as we want to, but if people don't feel they belong within an organisation, then they may leave. And that's the last thing we want. We want our talent internally, our staff, to feel like they belong. We want people to want to join the service because they see that representation within communities and also in self and in the emotional aspects because people belong within the workforce and the teams in which we work. And we're ardently pushing this by making sure that we remove barriers that exclude people. We understand our communities, we understand our own staff, and we're changing the culture and the environment in which people work. We're investing in pumps and appliances and our stations to improve the workspaces that people engage in, because we want our staff to be vibrant and feel vibrant in how they are at work. And of course, that will then pass into the communities and ultimately, of course, people that want to join us. And this also gives us the added benefits of creativity. For us to be creative, we need to have an environment of that, and we need to have creative people. And we're developing people, as we've said there, through leading the way schemes, through cross-regional and national access as well to talent, to make sure that that creativity brings new and innovative ways of working into the service, that we are constantly looking to develop and looking to change, and that we adapt and we move also with the risk and the vulnerability within our communities. And that way we're able to access new services with partner agencies. We're able to move, for instance, with health partners and access greater schemes. And this goes back to the people because we're here and we exist to serve the communities. So we are doing everything we can to make sure that as an organisation, strategically through to operational staff, we are here to deliver on their behalf. And the final aspect of this, of course, is learning, which sums up everything I've discussed there, that we need to be able to openly share all of our fears and challenges, and we need to be able to then overcome and improve ourselves. And we'll only do that through having a learn, not blame culture. We develop, we understand that we make mistakes, and then we are tolerant of that, and therefore we use that as a key driver to develop individuals, develop the service itself, and the work that we do with our communities, so that we're constantly learning with those. And only if we have our people feeling that way, if we promote our results and we make people belong in creative and innovative environments, we're able to learn and keep doing what we're doing, but constantly developing and moving forward. And it's absolutely essential to us that our internal talent and also anybody wanting to join us understands that our culture is based on these values and they represent our strategic direction through Enable and also the fire staff. And thank you very much. That concludes our presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. That was very in-depth report. Really enjoyed listening to what you're going to be doing. A lot of my questions have been answered. However, I'll just make a point and then ask a question, and that is succession planning for me should happen at all levels, not just to fill critical positions. I know you've got to start somewhere, but you know it goes from right from the bottom to the top. Yeah. So that's how I view that. Now, can I ask about exit interviews? Do you do them right now? If you do, great. Where does that data go to and how do you use it? If you don't, again, when will it be put in place? Can you just give us some surety on that, please?
Sean, are you answering that one?
Sorry, I was on mute. So at the minute they're not consistently deployed. We are looking to have those embedded by the end of this quarter. So exit interviews, we'll be using it to understand reasons for leaving, anything we can do to continually improve and to continually learn, as Jonathan's mentioned, one of the key values. So that'll be in place by the end of this financial year, and then we'll have that rolled out, and the data will be used to inform future initiatives.
Thank you. John, did you want to come in on that? Did I see your hand up?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I just wanted to stress the point there. We do have a policy which includes exit interviews for anybody leaving the service, but it's done on a voluntary basis whereby they're offered, and it relies on an individual to actually take that offer up. But we do have a policy which does include exit interviews, and certainly the outcomes of those are something that we're keen to explore further through the work that we've just been discussing there. But I just thought it was worth making that point.
Yeah, thank you, because you can get some really good quality data from that, which helps shape the service. So I think it's very important. Tom, I think you were next.
Unless Rebecca had something to come back on that point.
Rebecca?
Thanks, Tom. I was just going to supplement a couple of the points raised by John there in terms of staff members also have the option to meet with a range of people, whether that's locally with their line manager or also a representative from People Services to actually engage and conduct that interview. So I just wanted to add an additional point there.
Thank you. Tom?
Thanks, Zoe. JD, Sean, Rebecca, touched on some of these points throughout. I just want to make sure we have some clarity around a couple of points in particular. You've talked about identifying your skills gaps, which is really good to hear. More specifically, in looking at your workforce profile and so on, have you specifically identified single points of failure where a person leaves the service open to the potential for some serious knowledge loss, but more specifically where it's really important that we have some continuity in that role, and connected to that, beyond transition, what are you doing about transfer? So John, for example, how are we making sure that all the knowledge that you have is transferred effectively throughout senior leaders who are going to be remaining in the service, so that we don't lose some of that organisational knowledge that given the workforce profile that we have, how are we making sure that that transfer of knowledge is happening effectively?
Okay, I'll try and answer all of that, Tom. In the first instance, so specialist skills. Now, within the Enable profile, the Enable collaboration gives us that resilience, as we understand. So throughout, for instance, in people partnering, there are multiple staff all able to fulfil those roles, which gives us that resilience. From a fire perspective, this is something we plan hopefully years in advance, because we have, in theory, 30 years notice, 40 years notice of someone retiring. However, we need to take into account, for instance, with specialist staff within, for instance, fire safety, it can take 2 to 3 years for an individual to then come up to speed with all the skill sets to go in there. So we are actively now looking at those recruitment profiles with Enable and planning in advance for those. But we're also now bolstering those skill sets into supervisory and middle managers as well. For instance, the point I'll discuss in PAM is around, instead of just having a single unity of a core of specialist staff, we're then passing and pushing those skill sets into the operational workforce as well. One, to support and bolster that mechanism, but two, should somebody, for instance, give their notice in, we don't stop service. And that goes across all specialist skill sets within the middle manager cohort, for instance, fire investigation, hazmat officers. We're constantly reviewing and updating that profile of people. And incident command, we're already now training people, or in the process of training people to the incident command level of the higher rank. One, for them to jump on to the system should we need it for resilience, but two, so that when they are successful in promotion assessments, they hit the ground running immediately. We aren't then lagging or paying overtime or anything else to try and help maintain that provision. We have to understand, of course, it isn't a pure science. It involves people, and it's something that we are constantly, it's an iterative process and we're pushing that constantly, but it is now something that we have a far greater planning on. The data helps us to support that, and we are able to budget and effectively plan within there to make sure that we have those skill sets covered. Transfer of knowledge. Now, transfer of knowledge is, of course, and as we talked about there, we'll have a massive loss when the chief leaves this in more ways than one, but the corporate knowledge that John takes with him is significant. Now, we can spend all day, we can all develop it and work within there. So what we're doing is exactly the same as we've said there. The skill sets that John has and the corporate knowledge within there is being passed on to serving and current members of staff and potential future leaders within there. We have our own development profiles in there around the roles, around the core skills within there, the documentation and the specialist knowledge. For instance, 2 area managers leaving as director of capabilities, for instance, and director of assurance, just as 2 arbitrary figures within there. Group managers are qualified and trained and part of their conversations and within those workforce directorates. And where feasible within the transformation cycle and the change profile that we're doing, we then move those staff around as well, so that we pollinate across the board and make sure we have that. Again, it can never be a pure science, but we are doing everything internally where possible to bolster and provide that support. Becca, Sean, feel free to add anything further.
Sean, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say, just to build on Jonathan's points, I think one of the key things as well is another transfer of knowledge right now is obviously really, really important. What we're going to be looking to do going forward, because we have a more unified approach now with the model, over time we can get to a point where actually we understand that, okay, what knowledge, skills, experience, behaviours are critical for us to deliver against our strategy at every single level. So in the future, we can be at a place where, you know, we understand actually if Jonathan leaves, the knowledge gap is no longer going to be a huge issue because we've identified it earlier on and we've managed to upskill people across the organisation, as Jonathan said, and people from different levels, so we can future-proof ourselves further just through our increased planning, our increased data usage as well.
Rebecca, do you want to come in now?
Thank you. Yeah, I've just got 2 final points I'll briefly mention. I just really wanted to expand on in our presentation. Sean talked briefly around the coaching and mentoring academy, and there's a couple of things as part of that I really just wanted to share because it's the introduction to the service is new, and we've got 4 priority trial areas that we're focusing on. But in terms of answering your question, Tom, that's going to be another great opportunity to really share some of the skills and experience of knowledge of colleagues within the service. And equally, the second point I just wanted to share was that we are also currently reviewing the induction, onboarding and exiting process, particularly within the induction and onboarding. It's going to really allow us to capture some of the key learning, as Jonathan shared through the values perspective of understanding experiences of what colleagues have found worked really well, what was actually genuinely really helpful in their transitions between roles, and actually what needs to change as part of that. So we have that feedback to be able to respond and make any necessary adjustments as needed. So just wanted to share those 2 additional points there.
Thank you. John McFall.
Thank you. It's just a reminder to everybody that a lot of staff in both organisations don't always feel comfortable in having their exit interview with either senior manager or chief constable or chief fire officer. So they are entitled to have it through Unison and through myself, and I will obviously document that and pass it on to the relevant parties.
Thank you for that, John. Caroline, you're going to be the last person to speak on this item. I'd like to move on, please.
Thanks, Commissioner. It was just to highlight really in terms of the position I see that you've developed in terms of the strengths-based work and where you see other opportunities that may exist, for example, direct entry. You know, if you're identifying a gap in terms of some of the skills and where you can bring in other skills through other routes and what the potential is there for the service.
Caroline, thank you. You've just reminded me of a massive point which I should have discussed there, so that was absolutely remiss of me. Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. When we talk around opportunities, and particularly in talent management with this, the NFCC are introducing that is the National Fire Chiefs Council. They are introducing a national scheme where individuals will be able to access services at station manager and area manager level. So effectively middle manager entrance and also strategic or senior manager level. It's been through a national process, and North Yorkshire are now actively signing up to be part of that, so that we are, one, in the scheme of developing that so we can have our input, for instance, with the strengths-based leadership, but 2, so that we are able to understand the benefits that come from that role. Hopefully, we will be able to sign up and actually have the participants join our service, and hopefully it will help, give us greater strength in our gender or ethnicity as we're looking to do with our positive action. But ultimately, it's a tool within our talent management framework. It's part of what we're looking to deliver. Because it's national, what it does do, it's solving some of the issues where services have tried to transition staff across roles, and it hasn't been very successful. So that national perspective is a driver within here, and it's part of our toolbox for delivering the change profile we're looking at. Thank you for reminding me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item 5, and that's the fire service performance update. Jonathan, I believe you're speaking to this.
I am, Commissioner. I will try and share, but it's been a little bit sticky, so you'll have to just tell me if it's shared. 2 seconds.
I can see it, thank you.
Does it also place my notes pages on there, Commissioner?
It just gives us the front screen.
The presentation.
The presentation, yes.
And now this is the part where it won't
Jamie,
share.
you'll have to enable editing, but that means you'll have to reshare your screen.
Oh dear. 1 second.
Jonathan, will it help if I put the slides up and then you and I'll flick them on?
Chief, I was just going to ask you if you can. There's nothing happening at this end. Thank you. Technology is wonderful when it works.
Can everyone see that yet?
Something's happening.
Yes.
Okay, we have that, John. If you could just go on to the presentation for me.
There we go. So you tell me and I'll move on.
Thank you very much, John. If you go on to slide 2, please, John. So this is our incident profile. Month on month, we discussed that this pretty much remains static within North Yorkshire. We have some variances around seasonal times. Of course, when we have the transition of population in around the summer periods and around bonfire night and various other points. What I'd like to do is, because there wasn't a plan within December, is also just discuss, because it's some of the excellent work that the crews did, is around the Storm Arwen and the incident profile that engaged with the service. Now, over the 24-hour period, the service attended 88 calls, which for us is an increase of over 253% on the same profile of the previous week. 36% of those calls were actually to dangerous structures and 24% to incidents involving trees. But it just speaks to the large and the range of and scope of incidents that crews are going out to, and the aspect and the help that they're giving in the community. And this was on-call firefighters as well as our whole-time firefighters within the major urban areas. From the range of humanitarian aid that was delivered over that period included crews assisting some of the farmers where water supplies have been cut off to animals, helping to get water into those pens and into the animals. A number of road traffic collisions were successfully extricated individuals, and we even managed to extricate 4 youths from a public toilet who were trapped in there due to an issue as a result of the storm. So we had a large profile of incidents across that period, and again, the crews, I'd like to place thanks on there for the response to there, and particularly onto the humanitarian aid that they gave within their communities. Now, the only point to note within the December profile is a very slight increase within our automatic fire alarms, which I'll discuss later on in the presentation. If you go to slide 3, please. Now, these are our the top 10. Now, this rarely changes in here, and it remains that we have automatic fire alarms in North Yorkshire, as it is nationally, still remains the largest proportion of fire calls within the fire service. The only trend change that we tend to see is the reason for the automatic fire alarm. So I'm going to give a different focus here, which will be onto fires in the open, because we saw a large increase in November, understandably around the bonfire period, and then again a decrease in December. And this is something we've focused on, making sure that crews are out there giving positive action within the community, and also working with partner agencies wherever possible. For instance, crews in Richmond have been working with local policing teams where we saw an increase in a specific area of the community. We've also seen that this is linked to a trend on social media where crews are using, users are using aerosols for a very specific purpose, which is creating antisocial behaviour and also antisocial fires. So we have our community safety staff, community safety officers and crews, along with the local police staff and community safety hubs, working to actually provide an intervention into those areas. We've also seen, we have in February our Chimney Safety Week. Now, chimney fires, whilst not a large proportion of calls, we are actually sit within the upper quartile within the national reporting mechanism, and it is on our risk profile as to where we need to have an intervention. Now, crews, particularly in Richmond, again, have been out in the community providing this safety advice, and they recently attended an incident and put it on social media, and we've had an absolute massive response to this, having over 618,000 views, reaching over 800,000 people. It's an example for us about how we're trying to use social media. We're trying to develop our profile within there to reach communities, and also the key factor being educate and build community resilience for people to understand the risks of not having chimney swept, the impact that can have, and of course reducing our demand profile so that we can transition the time we would spend there into the community safety and preventative work where we need to. On to slide 4, please, John. Now, this is a fairly binary slide, which shows us that over the rolling period from January 20 to December 21, our automatic fire alarm profile. Now, through COVID, this decreased for obvious reasons. People were not into the workplace, and we see some seasonal fluctuations. We can see there between November and December, we had a very slight increase, which on the next slide, please, is our breakdown of those automatic fire alarms. Now, the left-hand part of the slide tells us about our, for that rolling period of January to December this year, we've attended a total there of 3,177 incidents, which for us represents a large. Tom, I'll take your question.
Big question about the malicious false alarms, JD, so I'll let you talk about them and then I'll come in. Okay,
thank you. These again represent a large proportion of our calls, and it's something that the fire service locally and nationally are looking to find different ways of working. And this ties into that part of our transformation programme is also, and in line with the risk and resourcing model, we're undertaking a root and branch review of our work around automatic fire alarms, interaction with businesses, and again how we can reduce this demand on the fire service so that we can put the work into better time for training or community intervention. Now, on the top of that, we have the false alarm apparatus. These type of incidents come from effectively human error, carelessly setting off an alarm as an accident, poor alarm maintenance in some buildings, and unsuitable sprinkler systems, for instance, being installed in certain areas. These can be avoided, and this is an area where we are having prevention and protection teams working with local businesses where possible to have that intervention with those. It's around education. We haven't got a significant number of businesses which are repeat offenders or who are constantly receiving calls. What we are seeing an increase on is individual premises where we are called out to those. Notwithstanding, of course, and as we talk about each month, is that these often represent life risk calls. So we will always have an attendance to those. It isn't something that we would stop or have cancelled off. And where these alarms come from call receiving centres, for instance, it's social housing or vulnerable residents where the call goes to a receiving centre, then to our service, we will, of course, continuously attend. Now, some information around here. Our prevention and protection teams are working with our training teams to now provide an internal education package. We have classification codes, which then deem the final code that we send off to the government for our reporting as to what the actual incident was. And sometimes that can result in crews providing the wrong code. So we are driving that change. We're making sure that we have a common understanding of everything we're doing. And this isn't just through an intervention in one area. This is right through all of our incident command, our training, all ops staff, anybody that has an ability to shape or change their call profile, we're putting in that education around there. We're introducing a revised form for crews to utilise when in the community. So if we're called to a business where we receive an unwanted fire signal, the new form allows us now to draw greater data. It gets a greater understanding of the risk profile within the building, and it will also allow us to then have an evaluation at the end of it as to what interventions we're doing and how those interventions are working. And that will be released in the very near future. What this will also allow us to do is capture greater data on our community risk system, because this is a gap currently where we need to utilise that further. One, so we can understand trend analysis better. Two, it needs to drive our training better. And three, and again, it's the evaluation, we need to understand what is working and what isn't, so we can continuously drive that change. We're also looking now to drive that level of data further to separate life risk and domestic actuations away from industrial and commercial. So when we understand the rationale and the reason for the unwanted fire signal, we can tailor the information to that specific premise, as well as if it's a national company, we can work with them nationally to make sure that the intervention we're having locally can, if necessary, be applied on a national context to aid other services, and we also receive that feedback. It is absolutely about targeted intervention and that prevention activity in the community there. Now, false alarm, good intent. This is things like the good old burnt toast in the toaster and food that's going into there. Again, if it's called through, if there's smoke, if it's burning, we will always attend. If we are sending two appliances, for instance, to this because it could have the potential to be a premise fire, or a member of the public called it in as a premise fire, if it was confirmed to be a toaster, we would still send one appliance to go and check, make sure the premise is safe, make sure the people are safe before they then left the scene. Again, it's about an education piece. Afterwards, where necessary, we'll follow that up with crews or community safety staff, just making sure that people are educated on risks in the home, around cooking, and around cloaking them with anything that we need to support them to reduce that either vulnerability or that mistake and make sure it isn't repeated. Now, false alarm malicious. Unfortunately, we get very few of these, but unfortunately, we do still get these types of calls. And the trend analysis gives us the top three premises that we attend, which is academic establishments, car parks, randomly, and entertainment venues. Now, we're using this data, once again, to try and target the preventative work to make sure that we're educating people within there. But we'll always get people, unfortunately, phoning these calls in, and there isn't anything when we get there. This, for us, currently is a gap, because we've identified an area for improvement around what do we do after that call. We can no longer leave that premise, and if we, those establishments, car parks, whoever it is, there is an owner and a responsible person for those premises or that type of premise. And we're now putting in a profile, once again, in relation to, as I've just discussed, to make sure that we have an intervention there, we are able to find a responsible person and help deliver that safety message that we need to reduce our demand profile and make sure that calls are not, pumps are not turned out unnecessarily to these type of calls. Tom, do you want me to take the message, the question now?
Yeah, so it was just, so I've been looking back across some of the recent performance packs, and it looks like malicious false alarms are, it's a very slow and slight uptick, but it does seem that there's been a bit of an increase over the last year, 6 months. I just wondered whether there was any work being done to identify the individuals involved in those malicious attempts in order to deal with any underlying behavioural issues that's leading the kind of malicious call.
Currently, no, but that's the gap we've identified. What it does need is greater, or if possible, depending on, of course, the demand this would place on the police, then co-working to understand if there's any CCTV or any other impact to identify individuals that we can have to try and stop that malicious activity. It is a gap, and that's what we're looking to drive that change through, Tom. Yes.
Thank you.
Next slide, please, John. So our absence statistics. I'll focus just here on the on-call. So we've had an increase in days lost from 581 between September to November into 641 across October to December. Currently, we have 8 staff on restricted duties. Restricted duties are where our staff are still able to attend work, but they may not be able to undertake physical operational work. So they engage with us to do meaningful work in other departments, for instance, community safety or protection, so that they still feel empowered and they are part of the organisation, but their days lost does go against that record, which is around 40% currently of the, the restricted duties gives us 40% of those staff are on the restricted duties, so it isn't substantive and days lost across the organisation. Now, enable staff, they've had a decrease in the long-term sick days from the 198 to 124. We'll come on to some rationale shortly. Our control figures hold steady, as do our hold time. Now, the key overall sickness is reducing, and this gives us a level now which is comparative to summer 2021, which is a great direction, and we all wholeheartedly believe it is because of the work that is ongoing through our occupational health. Now, our sickness in the York and Selby district, we have the highest rates there in our service for the long-term sickness, and in the Harrogate and Craven is the short-term, and we are looking at interventions within those areas. The top reasons for absence continue to be musculoskeletal, particularly back injuries, respiratory-related illness, mental health, and the remaining profile is on a small percentile, but across work-related stress, neurological disorders, and some other matters within there. Now, these become a key focus for our health and well-being, and our managers on district are actively support and promote the well-being within the service, and they work close with occupational health to make sure that wherever can, all our staff are supported. Now, COVID impact referrals continue to be high, and of course this is something we're going to continue to see potentially for some time, and the service is adapting with that as necessary. But to support staff, we are holding development workshops on back care, on sleep, diet and stress awareness, and also helping to manage those issues across the board. Note of the time check. Slide 7, please. Thank you. So the overall fire cover. Now, we do know in December that this went up 0.1% in December to 6.6, where we had a critical point on the fire cover there. Just a reminder to staff, to the communities, you will always receive an appliance, and it will always be an appropriate response across the county. We always have resilience mechanisms in place, so if you dial 999, you will always receive a fire engine. Slide 8, please. On-call availability. As we're aware and we discuss in each PAM, it is part of our strategic drive to improve this. Now, the stations I'm only going to mention are those which have had a lower attendance profile than last month. The reasons being, and this is more or less across the board, but I'll focus just on these, we have low numbers of staff in some of these stations. Particularly at Acomb, we've had 2 leavers and 1 individual long-term sick. Bentham has low numbers of staff and again, an individual on long-term sick. Across Kirby Moorside, Malton, Ripon and Stokesley, we have staffing profiles where we have dual contract staff, which is members of staff which are whole-time firefighters, but on their days off can provide on-call cover. But of course, where they're providing cover for one, they aren't providing, for whole-time, they aren't providing cover for on-call, and that has an impact. Add in there some COVID sickness and low staffing numbers, that has resulted in the impact on those stations there. What the public can be assured of is that we're doing everything we can to increase this profile. 2 sides. One is that we have a transformation programme which is ongoing for us to drive strategically the change for the on-call. And on the business as usual, we are transforming the way that we have a smoother joining experience into the organisation, greater support and targeted recruitment, which we've just discussed there, how we're designing our talent management profile. Slide 9, please, John. So our protection activity. Now, this work covers 3 key areas: statutory, so regulator activity, which is our fire safety, our audit inspections, statutory, non-statutory consultations, which is things like building inspections and licensing applications, and then guidance and advisory. literally guiding and advising people that call from the community or businesses. Now, we saw a noticeable reduction in protection activity in December due to a number of reasons. Firstly, a lot of specialist and routine work was postponed due to businesses not wanting us to be back in their workplaces due to Omicron, which led to delaying our attendance, particularly on the healthcare sector. We had our own sickness within there. And of course, where we have on-call crews which are not available, we transfer whole-time staff across those stations to maintain availability, which impacts in their own areas to the work that they can conduct in there. And it was the Christmas period, so we had annual leave. However, what we're currently doing, and this ties into the point earlier around our resilience, to engage staff and make sure that our staff can engage with the communities, we are delivering a training package into supervisory officers to make sure that they are able to engage with it into the communities. And this is part of the Her Majesty's Inspectorate's findings, and also findings from the Grenfell Tower report. We're upskilling our staff so that if protection officers are not available or for any other reason, our whole-time staff are able to go in and provide that immediate intervention and also education within their communities. Slide 10, please, John. We're at the time. Our prevention. So throughout December, our main priority and the safety campaigns was around Christmas safety, which was around electrics, candles and cooking safety, and also road safety. And over these two campaigns, we saw in the region of 200 hours of targeted prevention activity across the organisation. One point I'll mention in the time left is around our safe and well activity. Now, we've reached agreement with our trade unions for all staff to now undertake safe and well activity. A safe and well check is an enhanced home safety check. So whereas crews would normally go in there and give information to the occupiers around fire safety and also then fit the smoke alarms where necessary, a safe and well visit goes further, and it provides information on, for instance, fire-related risks, but a greater aspect of safety of the individual around smoking cessation, cold homes, slip, trips and falls, and social isolation and loneliness. The driver for this is that it wants to have an impact on reducing vulnerability from fire. We are then signposting to partner agencies and improving that, working with local community groups wherever possible to drive that vulnerability reduction. And I'll stop there and take any questions, Commissioner.
Thank you. And once again, thank you very much for your report. I have one question, and it's about the availability of on-call stations, those ones that we are struggling. Are we having difficulties in recruiting to these stations, please?
In some of the stations, yes, Commissioner. It's across the board for us. The changes that we're making now, instead of just holistically recruiting, whilst we're still inviting people to come and be a part of it within their communities, again, that talent management strategy means that we are now moving to targeted recruitment drives in those key areas where NESHA will run trainee courses, on-call courses just for those stations, so that we're allocating out on a risk-based and demand basis instead of just generic recruitment across the service.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from anyone? If not, I'll move swiftly on. I don't think there are. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you.
So, agenda item 6, North Yorkshire Police, initial police contact responding to the public presentation. I think I'm handing over to Lindsay for this one.
No, it's me, Commissioner.
Oh, apologies, Jason. Apologies.
I'll just hopefully share my presentation. Can I just check, is that showing?
It is, yes.
It is, Jason. Yeah, just have to go. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, apologise. I won't be able to see anybody's hands if they go up. So please, can somebody help me out with a shout if we have any questions? My name's Jason Dixon. I'm the Superintendent for Customer Contact, which is the department that has the force control room and all its constituent parts in it, but also has the front counters and exhibit services across North Yorkshire Police, across 8 different sites over quite a wide geographic area. The core of this presentation will be around the force control room and our response to calls for service, but I think it's worth mentioning the fact that my wider team actually support that function from our staff across those front counties in particular. Just wanted really in the first slide here just to highlight the kind of volume of calls that we're talking about, both going into the force control room and also coming out of the force control room, because I think sometimes those additional calls that are required are sometimes not recognised. So as you can see there, the emergency call line 999 or 112, which is a European we average round about 7,950 calls per month. Over the last 6 months, we've seen a significant increase, and indeed, sort of coming in from June of last year, we've seen a significant increase in the number of 999 calls, and I'll come on to that a little bit later on in the presentation. We have over 13,101 calls. Callback service, this is where someone can opt to, if they're waiting a little while, they can opt to have a call back so that they can put the phone down and we will call them back once we're free to do so and take their call and deal with their issue. Other emergency services, so for example, we may take a report of a road traffic collision, and we may then decide that we need assistance from fire and rescue colleagues or from the ambulance service, and we will make those calls from the control room to get those additional emergency services to come and support us in dealing with an incident. We average 17,500 incidents per month that we log and deal with. And it's worth noting when these calls are taken, each call requires the communications officer to look at 17 different aspects of things that they need to consider around the risk of the incident, making sure that names, addresses, telephone numbers are all accurately recorded on our systems for future reference. The automated switchboard, around about 13,000 calls come into those each month. These are the ones where people can ask to speak to a certain department, ask to speak to a certain member of staff, or just ask for an operator to speak to. During the day between 8 AM and 8 PM, those operator calls are diverted to our front counter staff and they deal with those. And they've been doing that now for a little bit over a year. And what we found is the actual speed of dealing with those calls has increased significantly. And it also takes that pressure of dealing with those calls away from the main force control room, so they can have more time and more capacity to deal with calls that are coming in from the public. And outbound calls in support of incidents, around about 15,000. This is where we might call another agency or another service that we need to deal with the incident. For example, we might call a breakdown recovery agency to come and support and take vehicles away, etc. So that just gives a very quick overview of our average monthly calls that are coming in, the level of work that's coming into the force control room. But in addition to that, we also have around about 3,000 emails that come into our general inquiries box that need to be dealt with. And we also have reports and inquiries coming in through our single online home service, which I'll come on to with some further detail later on in the presentation. This next slide just highlights 999 call handling performance. And I think it's important to state at this point that the level of performance we're seeing currently is not the level of performance that we are aiming to achieve. We are not meeting our average targets consistently. We do meet them, but we're not meeting them consistently on a day-by-day basis. So I'm not going to sort of try and say that we're satisfied with this level of service, because we're not. It's not what we're aiming to achieve. I'm not going to make excuses for the level of service. What I hope to do as part of my presentation is to give some context as to the environment that we've been working in, the challenges that we've been facing, and also what we are already doing and what we plan to do to address these challenges and to improve our performance moving forward. You can see from the top graph there, that's the police national 999 volume. It's a very clear increase. Since 2017, that's gone up by over 12%. You can see there, in 2019, we had a significant drop in the number of 999 calls, which matches the national lockdown. Obviously, people weren't leaving their homes, and the number of emergency calls dropped significantly. Since those lockdowns have been reduced or even stood down altogether, you can see there's a significant increase since then. And yet last year, just common usage in terms of 999 numbers. Every month last year, with exception of July, was our record month for 999 calls. So that just gives an indication of the kind of volumes that we were dealing with last year and continuing into this year. As you can see by the graphs there, 46, just over 46% of our calls, 999 calls, were dealt with in less than 5 seconds. Our target is to deal with 95% of those calls within 10 seconds. At the moment, we're just over 50%. If we go up to 30 seconds, then 75% of our 999 calls are dealt with within 30 seconds. As I say, we very much want to push those graphs to the left and get far more of those calls into the 0 to 5 and 5 to 10 second categories, obviously recognising that 999 calls are emergency calls for service. I'll just move on to our 101 call handling performance. Again, our target here is 2 minutes or 120 seconds on this graph. We are achieving that in around about 84% of the time. As you can see there, sorry, apologise, not 84% of the time, 48% of the time. As you can see on the graph there, just under a third of people are actually receiving a level of service on 101 that we would hope to replicate on 999. So they're having their 101 call answered in less than 10 seconds. When we look at the target of up to 120 seconds, we're up to 48%. And if we look at 5 minutes, which some might regard as not an unreasonable amount of time to wait for a non-emergency call, we're answering those 85% of the calls. Obviously, the numbers that we aren't particularly comfortable with, and we definitely want to move to the left, are the 15% that are taken over 5 minutes for us to answer. And hopefully I'll come on to some of the context as to why those challenges are in there and why we aren't achieving the level of performance that we would certainly aim to do. So the current challenges, as I mentioned, the continuing high levels of 999 calls are impacting across all of our call handling performance. October of last year, we had an increase of 20% in the number of 999 calls. November, that went up to 40%. So November's number of 999 calls was 40% higher than the average that we would expect. And that not only has an impact on our ability to handle those 999 calls and our 999 call performance, but it also impacts on 101 because we have to answer those 999 calls first. So we are diverting resources away from answering 101 to enable us to answer the higher level of 999 calls that are coming through. So that's one of the challenges that we're facing. It is a national challenge. As I said, every month last year, we thought that would start to come down as things settle down around the pandemic, but so far they haven't. So fingers crossed that that trend will not continue into this year, and we won't see another 8% increase in 999 calls. Challenges caused by the pandemic. Like all other agencies, I would imagine we've had similar problems with staff who have been self-isolating, who have been ill with COVID. So we've had the same issues with that. We've also had the same issues in terms of making the workplace safe and secure. So having to look at social distancing. But I think obviously with the control room environment, providing that social distancing with the level of technology and kit that we have has been an additional challenge. But I think probably the challenge that we've had, particularly in the force control room and through our front counters, which is different to other agencies, is the fact that people are calling us for advice and help on the pandemic. What do these COVID restrictions mean? What can I do? What can't I do? And we certainly had a lot of that in the first lockdown and lesser as we moved through, as people understood things more. But we still had that constant desire for information coming through. So to give an example, between March 20 and March 21, 15% of all our calls into the control room were COVID related. So quite a significant amount of work coming through there. The next challenge that we're facing currently is the introduction of new control room technology. This is kind of both a challenge and an opportunity, and I'll come on to the opportunity bit of it first. But whenever you are installing new technology, it comes with some pain. So at the moment, we're in the process of training all of our staff who use the control room technology to enable them to use the new system when it goes live. That draws staff away from their normal work, from answering calls, from dealing with the members of the public. So that impacts on our performance. Additionally, what we've had to do is we've had to convert half of the machines into the new technology and half of them into the old live half on the old system. That causes some difficulties in terms of being able to accommodate all our staff. So at the moment, our staff are spread out across 3 sites instead of just being in the one central force control room. And having all your staff in that one location gives us great economies of scale in terms of added supervisory cover and support for our staff within there, and greater command and control. So that, again, it's causing some additional challenges for the team until we go live, which will hopefully be on the 15th of February this year. Another challenge is the duration and complexity of calls. So in the last 5 years, the time taken to deal with a call has doubled. It's gone from 4 minutes 40 to 8 minutes 45. So we've seen a significant increase in the time taken for an individual call to be dealt with. And that's because of the complexity of society, the complexity of people's lives, the pandemic. Again, that kind of complexity of that call. It's not a straightforward report of an incident. There are other complicating factors in there which increase the level of time it takes to answer that call. And I think leading on to that is the increased vulnerability of callers and the increased number of calls involving mental health issues. For example, on average, we deal with 2,500 calls a month that have a mental health qualifier. And 15% of all our incidents have a mental health issue related to it. They aren't the kind of calls that you can deal with very, very quickly. They can be quite emotive. To give an example, one of my call takers was on a call for over 90 minutes, trying to make sure that they maintain the trust and the support of this individual. The individual was threatening self-harm, and by building that trust and confidence over that extended period of time, the communications officer was able to identify where that person was, direct officers to them, and prevent them from harming themselves. So just to give an indication that some of these calls, they're not all straightforward. Some are, but there are a lot of complex issues in there that my staff have to deal with, and they have to deal with each of those calls professionally and with empathy. And retention of staff. The roles within the force control room, some of them are seen as entry roles into North Yorkshire Police. Some of our staff come in, they work for North Yorkshire Police, they realise that we're a good employer, and they move on within the organisation into different roles. Some of them come in with a view to joining as police officers or PCSOs, and I think the issue with that at the moment is if that is their ambition, then it's probably the best chance they're ever going to have, because we're significantly recruiting both PCSOs and PCs along with a national uplift. So we have seen that we are losing staff to those roles. And if those are roles within North Yorkshire Police, then we can say at least we're keeping that talent within our organisation. I think the greater concern is when that talent leaves the organisation to go somewhere else, and the investment we've made in their training and development is then lost to another organisation or another agency. So that is a challenge that we are continuing with. Just leading on from that, so in the last 2 years, we've recruited and trained 92 staff within the force control room. That number would have been higher had it not been for the pandemic. Due to the pandemic, we've had to alter the way we recruit in terms of the social distancing within the training environment. So instead of being able to bring in cohorts of 12 trainee officers, we're bringing in cohorts of 8. And we have had some interruption to those training programs due to minor outbreaks within the training environment. But we have maintained that, and lots of other organisations haven't been able to continue that recruitment and training of staff, but we have managed to do that. We have a continuous recruitment and training plan. Our next intake will start on the 21st of March, and we already have intakes planned for March, June, September and December. What we aim to do and the issues I've mentioned about the numbers of calls continuing and being consistently continuing, looking at the retention issues within there and making sure we have sufficient staff in there, but also the complexity and the nature of the spike in demand. Sorry, was that someone coming in there?
I don't think so.
Oh, sorry, I just heard. So yeah, so we're developing that business case so that we can get the staffing levels within the control room to the levels that we need them to be able to deliver the service that we aspire to. Whilst we are dealing with these challenges and whilst we are recruiting, the Commissioner has kindly provided additional funding to provide overtime for staff from within the control room, but also other staff across the force who are trained to carry out those roles, to come in, to work overtime, to provide some additional support and to help us improve our performance in terms of our call handling. So opportunities, what have we got and what are we doing to try and improve our situation? that we're aiming to achieve. So we looked at purchasing this from an outside supplier. It was a significant cost. It comes with significant benefits, and there were ongoing costs that would need to be paid for that. However, our internal business insight team had a look at this, had a look at what we were trying to achieve, and have actually been able to develop an in-house solution. So that makes a significant saving on the public purse because we're not buying it from an external company. But the other advantages is it's ours, so it can be bespoke to our needs, and we can alter it and change it to suit our needs. So that work is ongoing, and what that'll help us do is, if we are directing staff, if we're looking at changing shift patterns, if we're looking at use of overtime, then we can use that more efficiently and aim that, target that resource to when we need it best, to when the demand picture tells us that's when we need those people in that post. The frontline goal group. We had two goal groups running really. One was looking at our frontline resources and our ability to respond to calls for demand, and we had a goal group running around the control room and the pressures in there and our ability to manage the calls. There was an awful lot of crossovers, I'm sure people would imagine there would be. So those two goal groups were amalgamated, and they've been looking at putting things in place to ensure that calls for service are dealt with and officers are dispatched in an appropriate timescale. So one of the things that they've done is we put additional resources into the Safer Neighbourhood Service Desk, which is part of my department underneath the Force Control Room, and they've been bolstered so they can look at taking away some of those calls for service that actually can be dealt with remotely, that we don't need to send a frontline officer to, that can be appropriately dealt with and satisfactorily dealt with a remote resolution. Now that remote resolution might be over the telephone, or like many people are using now through the use of Teams as we are today, to actually have a slightly enhanced interaction with a member of the public because you can see them. That will free up resources on the front line because those officers are no longer being dispatched to those incidents, freeing them up to deal with other matters and to start looking at prevention and early intervention. And that work, that enhanced service desk, will continue whilst we implement the plan for the initial inquiry team. The initial inquiry team will be a new team looking at managing calls for demand, high volume, low risk calls for demand, and looking at how we can appropriately deal with those to the satisfaction of the public, and again free up resource on the front line so that they can deal with prevention and early intervention and other initiatives whilst we still manage those incidents effectively. And working with partners to better manage demand. We already have significant partnership working in the control room. We have mental health triage nurses who are based within our control room, who provide a fantastic service, helping our staff when they're dealing with people who have mental health issues, providing them with additional information and guidance. And we use their expertise to make sure that the outcomes for that individual or that caller are the best that they can be, and making sure that they get directed to appropriate support mechanisms and health colleagues. But also looking at wider partnership work and looking to see how we can use best practice nationally to work with our partners to see where best some of this demand sits. Around about 20% of the calls coming in to the Force Control Room end up being diverted to other agencies. So can we look to make that a more seamless process? Can we look to actually educate the callers to understand who is the best service, who's the best person or the best agency to provide you with the service that you need? And that work is ongoing. So what would we hope to achieve in the next 12 months? Well, to be reassured that North Yorkshire Police has sufficient numbers of appropriately trained officers and staff to deal with the calls coming in and to respond to those calls for service. If we don't have those numbers in place, certainly we would need to be in have a plan to train for those. And as I've said, we already have a plan in the control room. We have planned intakes to make sure that we can recruit and train the staff that we need to continue developing the service that we provide. To ensure that additional methods of contact in North Yorkshire Police are introduced and fully explained to our communities. So making sure that single online home is something that the public are aware of, they can choose to use should they wish to do so. And also the continuing development of that, because what that provides now will change. So we need to make sure that the public are updated with what that functionality provides them, and also what additional functionalities that we are providing, and make sure they understand what their options are available to them, and they can choose whichever option to contact North Yorkshire Police suits them best. I've mentioned increased use of technology to improve our performance. If we can use technology to make our processes more efficient and more timely, then we will certainly be looking to do that. And I think ultimately, Commissioner, the thing that we want to be achieving is improved call handling performance for both our 999 and our 101. We're not where we want to be yet. Hopefully, I've explained some of the context as to why we're not where we want to be, and some of the plans that we have in place to get us there. And that is it. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. That was really in-depth and very interesting. Thank you very much. Just on your last point there, a question about the improved call handling times you're hoping over the next 12 months. When are you going to be reviewing this again? Do you review it on a monthly basis, you know, the call handling times?
Yes, Commissioner, as part of the Gold Group, the performance within the force control room is reviewed, and that meets monthly. It is monthly, isn't it, ma'am? I think it is monthly. Well, our next meeting's on Thursday, so it's fairly regular. And it's not, you know, it's also supportive. It's looking at what else do I need as a header function to help me to achieve, and similarly the commanders, what do they need to help them, you know, develop their ability to respond to calls from the public. And you know, as part of my business, we have a service plan, and I looked at, with part of that service plan is these kind of improvements, and some of these issues are in there. And obviously, Ma'am Butterfield, as my line manager, holds me to account for that and keeps me right.
Lindsay, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Just to complement what Jason's already shared, absolutely it's held to account monthly through the Gold Group at the moment. But I think it's fair, Jason, just to share with colleagues that there is visibility on a daily basis in terms of the control room call handling performance. So it features on the daily log, and it's also shared in a number of other forums. So just to reassure you, Commissioner, it is something that we keep a very close eye on.
Yeah, because as you are aware, this is one area of my concerns. It is how quickly calls get answered. It's really important that it's, you know, a shorter time. Peter, can I bring you in?
Yeah, thanks very much, Commissioner. Thanks for that, Jason. Very informative. One of the things that the public are often confused about is when to use the different services, when to use 999, when to use 101, when to use single online homes. We have a specific case in point that's been raised with us, and that's from students at York University about how they would report a suspected drink spiking issue and how that will be dealt with. I was wondering if you could sort of explain in general what service to use and talk about specifically the drink spiking situation. Thanks.
I think a general rule of thumb, Peter, is if something is happening there and then, if the person responsible is still present or there is still a risk or a concern to a member of the public, that is a 999. If something has already happened and there are no ongoing risks, so the difference is, you know, you could say a road traffic collision has already happened, the cars have crashed, but actually people are still at risk because the road is still blocked and people are still there. That's a 999. If somebody's knocked your wing mirror off while you've been parked in Safeway and it's gone and done, that's a 101 because it's finished, it's done, there's no one at risk. In terms of the drink spiking, I would suggest that would be a 999 because you would imagine that individual would need some help and support immediately, whether that be through ourselves or through health colleagues. There are also potential forensic considerations that we would need to look at in terms of that. I think with those kinds of incidents, you know, if it was 4 days later and the person had thought about it for a while and decided that something wasn't quite right about that evening and they want to make a report, that wouldn't be a 999 because that's somewhere away from the incident. If someone's walked out of a nightclub and they feel really unwell and the friend thinks that something's happened, that would be a 999 in my view. So the general rule of thumb for me is it happening now? So is someone in your garden prowling, someone breaking into your car? Is there is a violence taking place now? That would be 999. Things that leave people at risk, still at risk, then that would be 999. 101 and single online home are non-urgent. I'm having problems with ASB on a Friday night. Today's Tuesday. That kind of thing. It's not urgent, but it still needs. It's still a request for our service.
Thanks so much,
Caroline.
Thank you. I appreciate, Jason, you have put the single online home as an opportunity and can absolutely see that. And I know we're in early days, but are you seeing any challenges with the sort of future developments of single online homes? Is there anything, I suppose, that's emerging from its current form that you're looking to address?
Yeah, what we need to look at is how long it takes to process a report that comes in through single online home. That work is underway, so we can then look and say, well, what impact does that have on our resourcing model for answering 101s? Because at the moment, the people who are dealing with the reports coming in through single online home are the same people who will be answering the 101 calls. So we need to understand that better, so that I can say, you know, look, this has taken so many hours per month to deal with these reports, and again, understanding, are we getting all the information we need from those reports? Because if someone's filling in the single online home and we're not getting all the information, and we then have to ring them up to get additional information to allow us to understand what the nature of the incident is and how best to respond to it, that's not very efficient, because that's not then on that person's, you know, they're using 101 because they can choose to use that system when they choose it beneficial and they're free. Us then ringing them back up again, it's not, and it's not efficient from our point of view, having to chase people who may or may not be available to get information to allow us to process it. So I think we just need to understand that better, and it may well be that you know, it isn't a significant issue for us, and we can just look to resource that. But as I said earlier in the presentation, Caroline, there will be an increase in demand, because people who wouldn't have used the 101 or 999 will use this service, and it is a good thing, because it's an unmet need that people needed a policing service. For whatever reason, they were not comfortable ringing us, but they are comfortable reporting it online.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Can I ask a further question, Jason? And that's on the average call duration time continues to increase. Why is that? I mean, if we put to one side the mental health calls, which, you know, I could totally understand, but are there reasons? And also, are you asking more questions to make sure the right resource goes to help those people?
I think it has increased, Commissioner, but it's kind of leveled off now. And I think some of those increases have been things that we've introduced, like Thrive, which is the way that we assess risk and assess the immediacy of a response. So we can take that report and decide at what level of immediacy we send officers. So is it immediate? Is it an emergency? Do we send officers on blue lights, or can it be slower time? Can it be a priority where we actually spend up to an hour to get there? Or can it be scheduled? Can we just arrange an appointment and go and see that person at a time convenient to them and us? That added a lot of time into that call handling. There are other factors as some of the crimes that we deal with become more complex. You know, some of the issues that perhaps 4 or 5 years ago weren't as prevalent in our communities, and they are now. So that adds a little bit of complexity to it. But I think it's not continually going up. So that'll hopefully reassure you. It's kind of leveled off at around about that 8 minutes 45. And again, some of those calls will be a lot quicker. You know, some calls are very, very straightforward. Some will be a lot longer, but that's our current average. So we need to be able to set ourselves up with that in mind, in terms of, right, that's how long it takes to process a call. How many calls are we getting? How many staff do we need to be able to process that in a timely and efficient manner?
Right, that's super. Thank you so much. Any more questions at all or comments? I can't see any. So thank you very much, Jason, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Agenda item 7, and that's the police performance update. Lindsay, this is your turn.
It is, Commissioner. Thank you. Just bear with me, I'll share the presentation. Lovely. Can I just confirm that you can all see that?
We can, yes, thank you.
Brilliant. So apologies, I can only now see yourself, Commissioner, so please let me know if there are any hands up. Commissioner, the first few slides are a duplication of the information Jason's already shared, so I'm just conscious of time. Are you happy for me to just to skip through those ones? So that talks about contacting the police and our 999 demand for December, which Jason's already summarised, and the trends. I don't think there's any additional information in there that we haven't already talked through in more detail. And similarly on the next slide for 101. So again, Commissioner, I don't propose that I go through the detail there. The only point of note that I would make is in December 21, almost 65% of our received calls were either 999 or 101. What that shows is that we still have quite a good chunk of internal demand in there that we are putting on our own control room operators. So we have got some further communications work coordinated through the gold group that Jason's talked about. So that's a chief officer led scrutiny group in terms of our call handling performance. We've got some further communication to do with our staff to make sure we are reducing the internal demand that we're putting on the control room, meaning that our staff are free to take the calls from the public. That's absolutely where their attention should be. So that was the only point really that I would make from the 101 slide. Moving on then to our policing response. So this covers the period of the 14th of October through to the 11th of January, so 90-day period, and it summarises our response time for immediate grade incidents. So that's currently at 12 minutes 9 seconds for rural locations and 7 minutes 58 seconds in urban areas. And that's the point from which the officer is dispatched to them arriving at the incident. You'll see within that paragraph it talks about a lead time of 7 minutes 34 seconds from call to dispatch, and that ties in with the information that Jason's provided in terms of how long it takes us to log the calls and get the relevant information, which then enables us to dispatch the right resource or the best resource in those circumstances. It goes on to talk about that the overall time from call to scene in the time period is higher than our 2-year average, and gives some further detail around that. And also in terms of our priority grade incidents, our response times are averaging 20 minutes and 4 seconds, although quite often there is a delay between the call being taken and the officer or the resource being dispatched to priority incidents based on resource availability. So Jason's already talked us through the increase in 999 calls, which then it results in an increase in immediate grades. They will always take priority, and therefore we have seen a delay in terms of our attendance at our priority grade incidents, which are based on resource availability, just to give a little bit of context around the points that are made there. In terms of our immediate grade response, we're seeing a downward trend in our deployments. Again, linking in with the comments Jason's made, we've seen a reduction in our 999 calls, therefore we have a reduction in our immediate grade incidents that are logged, and we're currently averaging 80 incidents per day that are graded as requiring an immediate attendance. The bottom graph there shows our priority grade response, and again, downward trend in priority graded deployments during the last 90 days, averaging 78 incidents a day graded as priority. The information that's provided on the bottom of that slide shows the last 90 days deployments broken down by antisocial behaviour, crime and PSW. So PSW is our concern for safety, public safety and welfare calls. What that information is showing is that we are deploying 1,555 more resources to public safety and welfare calls than crime, but actually our time spent on initial response is much longer when dealing with crime than public safety and welfare. So it just shows a level of complexity there in terms of the resource that's required. We need to think about not just the increased volume, but also the type of incident that we are deploying people to, because that will dictate how long they need to spend there and whether or not indeed we are the best service for that individual at the time. The next slides summarise our crime volume and crime performance. So again, 17th of November through to the 14th of December, it's a previous 4-week period that we are comparing with the 15th of December through to the 11th of January, so the last 4 weeks. And this information is based on the committed date of Apologies, Commissioner, can you still hear me?
I can. You just froze up slightly then.
Sorry, hopefully that's it rectified. So this information shows the crime based on committed date, so acknowledging that crimes may well be reported after the date in which they are committed. This information shows the dates that they are committed, and it gives a summary showing that crime overall has reduced by 15.96%, and that's over the last 4 weeks based on that data set. And we can see within there that actually we saw a decrease on every day of the week compared to the previous 4 weeks. At the bottom, we see the 12-month trend showing the only volume increase over the last 4 weeks, which was theft from person, showing a sharp incline in the highest monthly since September 2019. And we are doing some further work internally to make sure we understand exactly what that is before we shape our response to it. The next slide summarises crime volumes, 12-month data set, 90-day data set and 31-day data set from December 2021. In terms of the 12-month data set, we can see in the summary paragraph below, we've seen an increase in public order offences, fraud and drug offences, and a reduced prevalence of theft. Moving through to 90 days, that shows the summary of our information, again, very much the same in terms of the trend, and similarly for the last 31 days data broken down by the particular trend or crime type.
Lindsay, sorry, can I just come in quickly on this, because I want to pick up on the theft element of this again, and especially given the trend line that was on the previous slide around the uptick in that, because we've talked about this a couple of times at PAM in the recent months. It's great to know that it's featuring on the control strategy through the kind of community harm focus that the force has now. It'd be really good to just get a better sense, I guess, and maybe this is something that we could get as a special slide in the next meeting, perhaps. But something around what that is actually not presenting as what action that is resulting in having that on the control strategy when we're looking at the way that theft is now presenting as the second highest volume of crime that we have in the county. What specifically are you doing to focus attention on that and make sure that we're trying to drive down the numbers of theft crimes, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. I think it's probably most helpful if we bring that back into next month's PAM, if that's in order with yourself, Commissioner. We'll work through that detail with the commanders.
Perhaps we could have a quick discussion about that outside of the meeting as well, and bring that back to the next meeting to reassure the public. Thank you.
And also, if you don't mind me saying, just to make sure that whatever you're discussing has been implemented and the timescale to that as well. Thank you.
No problem, Commissioner. Thank you. Okay, moving on then, and conscious of time, the next slide summarises crime over the last 24 months. So this shows the impact of the lockdown stages that we've all lived through. You can see this, so the top chart shows the date the crime was committed. The bottom chart shows the date that the crime was recorded. And I think we've summarised some of this information here previously. At the start of lockdown 1, we did see a sharp decrease in crimes committed and recorded. Lockdown 2 was the slightly different lockdown for us because that saw the introduction of the tiered system, and without going into the detail that I know we've provided here before, that was where York was in a different level of tier compared to North Yorkshire. So we did see some challenges around the policing, particularly in the city, with an influx of people from elsewhere because of the stringent restrictions within their own hometowns and areas in which they resided. And then lockdown 3, very similar to lockdown 1 in terms of that sharp decrease in crimes committed and crimes recorded. In terms of the particular crime types compared to the lockdown data.
Sorry, Lindsay, sorry to interject again. Just on that previous slide, what I guess this is showing is it's great that people are now reporting crimes that perhaps happened during lockdown. What is the impact of the fact that these crimes are being reported to you post-fact in this way? Is that hampering your ability to investigate them effectively, or are you still managing to do what is needed?
If you bear with me, Tom, if I take you on to the next slides, hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those points for you. I think some of the question that you've asked in terms of our demand, we've seen through the increase in calls for service through the control room, and I know Jason has summarised that. That has put pressure on us from a call handling perspective. It's also put pressure on us from a response and investigations perspective too, and that's why we've got the gold group sitting around the frontline response, because we absolutely have seen some of those challenges come through and some challenges in the number of investigations that have followed. The violence against the person chart at the top of that particular slide, I would say, comes with a caveat that we know there are some hidden harms. So we know that perpetrators, particularly in relation to offence types such as domestic abuse, absolutely took advantage of the fact that their victims were locked down and therefore not able to seek help and support in some of the usual ways that they would. And as you would expect, we've seen a rise in the reporting of those types of incidents once the lockdown restrictions are eased. So without going into too much of the detail, just to give the reassurance in terms of that we were very quick to adapt the way in which we work. We recognised that that was a risk at the time, and there was an awful lot of work done with our partners and commission services through your office, Commissioner, to make sure that we were promoting the help and support that was available out there for victims, and being quite creative about how we did that. So making sure that things like helpline numbers were promoted at the testing centres, and latterly the vaccination sites, making sure that we were having the right information in places such as pharmacies, and making sure that some of the national schemes such as Ask for Angela, which is the ability to ask for help in the nighttime economy, were promoted accordingly. So whilst we did see the reduction at the time of the lockdown, we have seen an increase afterwards, and I think we will continue to see an increase in some of those reports. I don't think we've got everything coming through to us yet that has happened during those lockdown periods. So Tom, just to summarise your point, I think we will continue to see that pressure because I think there are a number of offences, violence against the person, domestic abuse, child abuse, and similar type of offending that will continue to put pressure on us for the coming months and probably years. Does that answer your question, Tom?
It does, thank you. Yeah, it's something I think would be worth us keeping an eye on. Thanks.
No problem. Similar trend for sexual offences, and then so the increase for domestic abuse, increase for sexual offences, which is summarised in the percentages just to the right hand side of the chart, and then also in terms of acquisitive crime, so fraud, theft and robbery, we have seen a reduction. So the point on the earlier slide was around theft from person, and that's absolutely the information we'll bring back into this forum. But overall for acquisitive crime, we have seen a 3.89% reduction. And we know, again, some of the challenges and opportunities that lockdown brought, particularly for fraud victims, and the shift of offending onto online scams and the like. The next slide summarises outcomes in relation to our crime performance. So this gives the information over the last 3 years for police systems. You can see there that on 14.79% of crimes that are recorded, we have resolved with a positive outcome. That includes charges, cautions, warnings, or alternative disposals such as restorative solutions. And of the 14.79%, 39% of that was resolved by charge. To the right there, we can see that prosecution reasons where the prosecution is prevented due to evidential difficulties, or perhaps it's not in the public interest, that's approximately 14.62% of occasions. The other information on that slide shows us that on 28 almost percent of incidents where victim declines to support a prosecution, and in 82% of those cases they have a named suspect. So that doesn't mean that we simply do nothing with that crime. So our officers and staff are encouraged to progress evidence-led prosecutions, so that means there are certain circumstances where we would still progress the matter despite the victim declining to support, and domestic abuse is a prime example of that. And then the bottom box on the left hand side shows that almost 26% of crime investigations are closed pending is complete, but no suspect has been identified. And just to the right hand side there, we showed that 16% are awaiting outcome. So it's either still under investigation or awaiting review and closure by the crime management unit. So the crime management unit is a function that also sits under Jason within customer contact. And Jason and I have had some conversations in terms of supporting that team through overtime to make sure we are bringing down those numbers and appropriately closing crimes in a timely manner. The bottom chart, I think, just highlights some of the complexity around our investigation and the significant time it can take to resolve incidents due to perhaps forensics or digital examinations, and that's why we see the volume, the volume lag around the timings.
Sorry, Lindsay.
Okay, Commissioner, I think this is a slide that you've had previously. It just summarises where
Lindsay,
we're at in terms of the victim's journey.
Oh, she's dropped. She definitely couldn't hear me at that point. Mavs, maybe I could come to you with the question instead on the outcomes slide there. I don't know whether Amanda or Simon have the slides open and whether they could share it quickly, just so that we can bring the slides back up. I had two questions about the outcomes there. One was just, well, first of all, just a note to say that I know from the charts, all we can see is the 3-year view, but I'm very aware that there have been crimes which are still awaiting outcomes from previous months, which have now fallen off the left-hand side of this chart. So just wanted to make sure that we're keeping it in. We've picked up the awaiting outcomes bit a few times again now. I've been having a bit of a look into some of that. Two questions arise from that. One, I can see that there are a number of quite sensitive crimes which potentially are still under investigation. Could you say something, please, to in terms of assuring the public about the process that you have to keep a check on those crimes which are taking a longer time to investigate, so that we know that everything is being done to progress them as best as possible? Because I can see there's some quite old crimes, 2-3 year old crimes now that seem to be quite sensitive and are clearly taking very complex investigations. So there's that element, and then the second element, I could also see that quite a lot were cases relating to fraud that are being investigated nationally by the Fraud Investigation Bureau and are just held in our systems for recording purposes. And so I guess that goes question there, I guess, to your point, Lindsay, that you made around, are we confident in terms of our crime data integrity that we are doing everything we can to process these crimes? Because actually it seems that a large proportion of those crimes that are awaiting outcomes aren't actually being investigated by North Yorkshire Police at all. And therefore, we may be getting a false picture as to what is on our books. Just those two questions, please.
Yeah, Tom, I'm going to say, Lindsay, do you want me to pick them up? Yeah, and if you could maybe come in just on the fraud one. So thank you, Tom. I'll take your last question first, which was in regards to the sort of sensitive investigations. Some of them are obviously clearly long running. And just to describe a process, what we have is supervisory reviews built into any investigation, which is really, really important for us. And what we do and make sure is when supervisory reviews take place, the direction is given to the investigating officer. Sometimes it's quite simple. It's about noting that, because actually we know with some of the challenges we've got within the criminal justice system, some of the cases that you are referring to are awaiting criminal justice outcomes, or a court case, for example, and the delays in the criminal justice sort of process itself, because of COVID and the impact of that, is having an impact on our investigation. So it's a case of just noting that and making sure that we're providing them the support and the victim is still on board, because what we don't want is victim attrition and losing the victim support for the investigation. And that is a challenge for policing and us here in North Yorkshire Police. The other element is to make sure that the colleagues on the front line and in our specialist posts, in particular for the specialist investigations, are progressing investigations, and they have the necessary support and time in order to do that. And that's where the supervisory reviews come in. With regards to governance to ensure that's taking place, that comes through the discussions that we have around victim services work, victims codes, etc. And we're also bringing that into a goal group that I've got established starting in the forthcoming week, because it's part and parcel of our preparation towards the VSA inspection that will take place in June. The other point you made in relation to I think the backlog you were relating to in the application of outcomes in the COMU. It's interesting, just having a conversation with Lindsay in relation to that yesterday. Jason, it sits under Jason's portfolio within the wider customer contact. We know it's been an issue, and we know there's been a backlog. Jason has put an application in for some overtime, some additional overtime in order to do that, and we have significantly reduced the backlog compared to where it was, because it's really important for us to apply the outcome in the year that outcome is applicable to. In particular, when we are doing home office returns, because we are potentially selling ourselves short as an organisation in terms of what we have achieved with regards to overall outcomes. So it is on my radar, just to give you that assurance. And I will let Lindsay, if that's all right, just answer the question in relation to fraud and CDI, if that's okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Tom, in relation to that point, and apologies, I lost connection throughout your question, but it's probably a question for me to take away and discuss with John Hodgson and make sure we provide you with a full update at the next PAM, if that's okay. I think John's probably the better place than I am to give some detail around that.
That would be great. It was just if as I'm only reading what I can see on the data screen, obviously, but if it is just for recording purposes only, then I wonder why we're holding them, but that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So apologies, I think my signal cut out just as I got onto this slide. So that this talks about the victim's journey and where we aspire to be. It picks up the point that's just been made by Mr. Hussain in relation to the goal group around our inspection regime, particularly the victim audit that we know we will have later this year. So I think it's fair to say there will be further detail to follow in coming months around victim journey and how we capture our performance against that slide. But I know you've had that information previously. And then just to finish, apologies, hopefully you can see the stop and search slide there. I think it's fair to say we've got some further work to do in terms of the visibility of this information, particularly bringing it into this forum, but this gives a summary from January until December of last year of our stop search performance, showing that we've had 1,632 stop search incidents with 2,233 nominals searched. You'll see as a gender split, I've clarified where the gender is recorded as unknown. That's based on the officers who've input that information. So we've got a training issue there around why officers are recording person's gender as unknown. And that's been picked up through a training video that is due to launch very shortly. And then at the bottom of that, it shows our top 5 reasons for search. So you'll see that drugs continues to be our highest reason for stop and search, followed by stolen goods, bladed article, articles used in theft and offensive weapon. And then the final slide just around our workforce. Again, fairly self-explanatory in terms of police officer numbers, PCSO numbers and police staff, specials and volunteers. Commissioner, there's an error on the paragraph sitting alongside the volunteer section there. It talks about having an increase due to a data cleansing exercise. I've clarified that's not actually correct. It's due to a recruitment drive around our volunteers, and that's why we've seen that increase of 50 from the previous month.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Can I just bring in John Macfall? You wanted a question?
Yeah, slightly early, but I was putting my hand up in advance. It was regarding the workforce diversity, but I'm sure Lindsay's coming on to that one, so okay. I'll hold off for a second.
Thanks, Lindsay. I apologise, everyone. I know we're running over in time, but we'll be able to wrap it up soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. So just to finish off that slide, then in terms of workforce diversity, you will see the split there. That is across the entire NYP workforce. I know we have focused predominantly on police officers, and we've got further work to do around police staff. And I suspect that's the point that John is going to raise. But that does form part of our plans, and I know John is working with colleagues to help us address that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just request going forward from this point, because it's a good point to start at, could we separate the diversity side of it for police officers and for staff, because they are totally different bodies, and I think this is the ideal time to actually start identifying are we actually having great success in being a diverse workforce, or are we just tying everything in because we know clearly, we've done quite a few projects on increasing diversity within police officers, but we haven't done it within the staff, and obviously that's the side I'm interested in. Thank you.
Absolutely, John, thank you. I know we've had some conversations across with the Commissioner's Office in terms of this pack in particular, so happy to pick that up as a point as part of those further discussions, if that's okay. And then the final slide, Commissioner, this just shows workforce absence and wellbeing. It's obviously a snapshot in time based on a particular day. So the figures there are showing on the 13th of January. Just to give today's data in terms of our COVID-19 sickness absence, we're down to 36 absences due to COVID-19, and we're down to 23 in terms of self-isolation. And I think that's in line with the national trend as we move through the Omicron wave. And thankfully, those numbers are beginning to decline. And then final points in terms of sickness, the diagram on the left at the bottom of that slide shows the sickness split by physical versus psychological. You can see roughly 90% physical sickness and 10% psychological. And then just to the right hand side, it gives some further information in terms of the last 12 months. And as you would expect, the top 4 absence reasons are led by coronavirus, 402 absences in the last 12 months. And that concludes the police performance presentation.
Thank you, Lindsay. That was very in-depth. Thank you very much. You've had quite a few questions as you've been going through your presentation there. I don't have any further questions at the moment, and I am mindful of time. Are there any other questions at all or comments? No, I don't think so. So thank you very much, Lindsay.
Thank you.
So, agenda item 8, questions from the public. We don't have any further questions, but what I will say is that I do apologise. There was an interruption in the live broadcast and we lost about 5 minutes of the meeting. So anybody watching who felt they missed out, please get in touch with the office and we'll provide you with the information that was said. So agenda item 9, any other business? I don't believe there is anything. I'm looking. No, there isn't. So it leaves us to agenda item 10, which is the date of the next meeting, which will be Tuesday, the 22nd of February. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.